So I want us to talk about something. The benefits of a marriage out of community or property. I always fight with people and say, you have to understand a marriage out of community or property for what it is, not what you hear, not what you perceive it to be. A marriage out of community or property is a property regime that affords protection to spouses whilst they are married. It's much more beneficial for when the both of you are married. You'll understand in a second why I'm saying this. But before we do so, enter into this discussion, I think it would be wise for me to introduce myself to the people here, especially those that are here for the very first time. My name is Yolanda Mnyengeza. I'm an attorney by profession, situated in Johannesburg, South Africa, or I am based in Johannesburg, South Africa. So what are the benefits of a marriage out of community or property? Are these benefits things that are much more beneficial during or after the marriage? What type of benefits do you get when you're still married? And what type of benefits do you get after the marriage, if any? Let's talk about this. Listen, when you enter into a marriage out of community or property, often the desire is that you don't want your assets to be combined, and thus your things and that of your spouse form this one joint estate. The idea often is you don't want limitations as to how you transact. You don't want any of the actions you'd like to take restricted because you have to get permission from your spouse, etc. Then people would opt for this type of marriage. And also people don't want to be affected by the decisions of their spouses, right? And so they believe that it's best they enter into what? A marriage out of community or property. So what does this marriage do? What does it offer as a benefit during the marriage? So first things first, when you enter into this type of marriage, because you are saying that you want to control your own things separately, it means, right, that you're able to purchase whatever it is that you want without any restriction. You're able to enter into any debt or transact with third parties as you wish, right? You're able to, encumber yourself as much as you want, right? Encumber the properties you have without having to get permission from any other third party, which is your spouse. Now, this protects you in a sense that if your spouse is reckless in nature, and they take out debts without thinking, or they run something like a business where they constantly, end up stepping in as surety for all debts, at least if anything happens to them or their assets and they are pursued by creditors, etc., you're fully protected from their decision making. You are covered on that basis, which means that if they lose, you don't lose. To a certain extent, you're not going to be disgruntled, right? Because a lot of people get disgruntled in a marriage in community or property because the next thing they see is they get intertwined into the issues of the other spouse, whereas they have been operating fairly in this marriage. So that's the benefit of a marriage, or the benefits of a marriage out of community or property. Now, let's take it a bit further. The other benefits that you have are that any benefits that come from third parties to you, they're not going to be intertwined into this marriage. They're going to be yours solely and fully, right? You get an inheritance from your family automatically, whether it's coming via a will or outside of a will. You know that when you benefit such, it's only for you. It's not for any other person's benefit. Your spouse can't even lay a claim on it because you're married out of community or property. This is a protection, right? If you get a gift, your family decides to purchase a property for you, they don't have to be worried that, oh my goodness, this gift is also going to be forming part of that marriage. No, that house is going to be yours alone because you're married out of community or property. It is yours. So do you see the stretch of this protection? And if you look at what we've discussed thus far, these protections are afforded to you whilst in the marriage. Now, looking at these protections, would they want you, or they influence you to want to leave a marriage of this arrangement, or rather stay because you are fully protected? Because let me tell you, one of the other things that I've seen with people that influences them into wanting to end a marriage sometimes is also the financial pressure and strain that's put on this marriage by another party. Yes, there are other issues, but see, this one, when it also is part of those issues, it often gives people the idea that maybe I should not be here. And so at least if you're married out of community or property, you're not going to have that during the marriage, because you know that every decision a person makes, it's for them. They need to account for it on their own, especially if it's something that's reckless and they're not, conducting themselves in accordance or in a way that's going to help everyone in the particular family. Now, then people say, no. This marriage is actually very useful for when the marriage ends. And I say, I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. So when you leave or the marriage ends by death, right, in South Africa, the idea in particular, let's say a marriage out of community or property without accrual, which means nothing is going to be calculated after, people just take what is due to them and leave. According to South African law, when you leave such a marriage, there is a potential now because of legal developments. And I'm going to put down this case on the description so that you can also read it when you have some time. Now, the development is that even though you would have entered into a marriage out of community or property without accrual, when you are exiting this marriage and there is a spouse that's probably let's say in an impoverished position, not as well off as you, the law says that that person or that spouse who is in that position, let's even make an example about this type of person. Let's say this person was a housewife, and you, on the other hand, was the one who was working, acquiring assets, and everything is in your name, and the only thing really the other spouse was doing was to take care of the family, and this was based on the agreement that you guys had as a family unit. But now the marriage comes to an end because financially they had nothing. They are unable to leave with anything unless, of course, you offer them something. And in most instances, we would not see these offers. So the law says that such a position, such a person in such a position can be able to go to the courts to ask that some redistribution be done, that they get something. Though the marriage says when you're married out of community or property, you keep things separate. And this should continue even after you guys are divorcing. The law says now that unfortunately people who are in this position, this impoverished position, can be able to ask the court to make a redistribution of the assets, meaning that allow for the other party who's in an impoverished position to tap into the assets of the other spouse or the other party. Now, could you say now that that is a benefit? This particular redistribution that can take place, would you deem that as a benefit? So do you see where I come from when I say that you're much more benefiting in a marriage out of community or property whilst in the marriage and not outside of the marriage? Let me also bring another point so that we can clarify this stance that I have, that really benefits of such a marriage are is something that you attain or benefit from when you're still in the marriage. Now, when you're married out of community or property, obviously you own everything fully, right? You don't share it with the other spouse, unless of course you guys decided to buy something jointly. Now, in most instances, people who are married out of community or property think that because they own everything, automatically, if they die, only their children are going to benefit. Or if they don't have children, irrespective of the fact that they are married to you, they believe that their family will get everything that they are leaving behind. Because why? Because in their minds, this marriage was protecting exactly that every benefit they have or have accumulated, it should only be for their family. Let me shock you. If you're married out of community or property, yes, you own everything, but it's not automatic that your family or your side of the family is going to get everything if you don't have kids. And if you have children, there is no guarantee that those kids are going to get everything. Unless, of course, you decide to draft a will, which is something we do not want to do, which you have to do. But this cannot happen if you don't have a will. What happens if you then die whilst you were married out of community or property, leaving behind a spouse without kids, or leaving a spouse behind with kids? Well, the Interstate Succession Act says this. If you were married out of community or property and you had a spouse and children that you were leaving behind, both these parties are going to share in benefiting the things that you're leaving behind. Yes, you might have been married out of community or property with your spouse, but according to the Interstate Succession Act, it says what? Your spouse is meant to benefit something here, which is often what? Either a child's share or 250,000 Rand. So don't be shocked when your spouse comes forward, and let your kids not be shocked, because you have a responsibility if you don't want this to happen. The responsibility is that you need to draft that will and ensure that everything you have goes to the people that you want. You have to nominate them. What happens then if you leave the spouse and you don't have kids? You were married out of community or property. What does the law say there? You don't have a will. Again, the Interstate Succession Act says everything will go to your spouse. Not because of joint estate, none of that, but because this person was your spouse. Would you say that this is a benefit for you or your family? Many people don't think so. This is why I then say a marriage out of community or property is a benefit that's vested mainly for you whilst in this marriage. But after, the things tend to change and be complicated to the extent that the benefit necessarily is not something that's guaranteed. So my suggestion to you, do not opt to not utilize this marriage. This marriage is beneficial during your marital relationship. Very important. But again, if you want the benefit to continue, you want to direct how your things will be inherited. You want, i.e., your own blood family to receive your own things, right? Because other people have that perception. Then you have to do your proper planning. Because without planning, that benefit or those types of benefits you were receiving during your lifetime are not necessarily benefits we can drag so that they can now apply after the marriage. So I hope you learned something from this. If you have questions or you want to engage on this content, or you have a story where you have experienced exactly what I'm speaking to here, do not hesitate to share it. We'd like to hear it. I'll see you some other time. Again, my name is Yolanda Mnyengeza. It was nice talking to you.